Let me introduce myself. My name is Ty, and I have worked with kids for more than 20 years now as an educator, um, from kindergarten all the way up to high school. I'm currently working at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History as the Nature Adventures manager. I design curricula for the camps and the classes at the museum. My greatest joy is watching kids get that aha moment where they have discovered something or were able to build stuff. So anything that they're learning, whether it's astronomy or zoology, I just love watching kids get excited about science. Before we get into that, I just want to say that nature is everywhere. It's not limited to the snowland or the beaches. It's just everywhere. So you can find nature, say, at the museum in our forest or woodland area where the dinosaurs are hanging out. You can find nature in your own backyard. Um, if there's dirt and there's green things growing, you've got nature going on. So you can find it in your backyard or your garden. It can be at the tide pool or the beaches. We have a lot of beach area here. And at the beaches, we get really excited about the tide pools because there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of things happening at the sea. The ocean waves bring stuff in, take stuff out, and sometimes even the land changes. So it's always exciting at the beaches and tide pools. You can find nature at the local parks, whether it's Stevens Park, Evergreen Park, Oak Park, Bonnet Park. All the parks have some level of nature. Sometimes you might have to find it, but it's pretty much right under your feet. Okay, so you can always find nature, and there are a lot of local hiking trails as well. As with all of these spaces, we want to make sure that we are safe in these spaces. So at the museum, it's easy for the forest because it is enclosed and there's a lot of people there. If something were to happen, you'd have somebody to help you. In your own backyard, in your own home, you know that best because that is your house. And you know your garden very, very well. The beaches and tide pools, we'll talk about safety in a little bit. Local parks, you do have to be aware of the surroundings. Sometimes the parks are a place where not so nice people hang out, so you just want to make sure you are aware of your surroundings. Sometimes they have construction, and so you have to watch out. Kids get excited about construction vehicles, so you just want to make sure you are aware of your surroundings. Hiking trails, you know, the older you get, the more daring you get. And sometimes young people like to see um, those daring people jumping the rocks, climbing the rocks, but you got to make sure that they stay within their capabilities. And so you are going to be the one to help them with that. I recommend staying on trails, knowing the foliage around those hiking trails, and we'll touch a little bit on that in a minute. Okay, so nature is everywhere. So let's go exploring. At camps, we like to develop learning skills through experience. I'm a firm believer that the way to learn is through experience. And the reason for that is it touches you emotionally, so you can get it from the heart. If it's something like animals that you're really endeared to, then you'll remember that lesson about anatomy. If you get a boo-boo from the experiment, you will remember the experience, and that is another learning experience. Sometimes there's a certain level of frustration or happiness based on the experiment, and it hits the emotional chord. So that's through the experience, they will remember things. So in our camps, we try to develop learning skills. Some things are pattern recognition. What do you notice about life cycles? Why is it always the egg, the pupa, the larvae, and then the adult? And it goes through that same pattern over and over again. You might have the same plant life cycle, it goes from seed to seedling to the tree. And, it takes a certain amount of time for that to happen. But it's just like themselves. They go from a small person to a larger person over time. So pattern recognition is important. We can incorporate math into our lessons, and they don't even know that it's math. You ask them how many seeds do you have? There's a counting exercise to that. You can talk about size comparisons. So greater than or less than becomes important in that sense. You can teach them about shapes, and you start developing the vocabulary for shapes. The science lessons are almost a given. You talk about biology, you talk about anatomy, you talk about physics, you talk about chemistry, and it all gets incorporated into it. And sometimes they don't even know that they're learning something new. If you are well versed in the science world, you can introduce the science words. And sometimes it may surprise you that they may ask you, what's the science word for change? And you will say, oh, we need to look that up. Or if you know it, it's metamorphosis. And, trying to get a 2-year-old to say metamorphosis is kind of enlightening too. You can see that their tongue is really, the muscles in the tongue are overworked. And so it gets to be a cute memory, I think. As the kids go to school, parents will start hearing these terms like NGSS, STEAM, Common Core, and you're going, all these words, what do they mean? It's just different learning strategies at the time. So we like to incorporate a lot of those into our lessons. So we like applying STEAM principles, STEAM meaning science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So we incorporate them into one unit as opposed to each separate unit. And so when you're building a structure, you're, is this material going to work for this structure? The technology, you might have to look it up and find different styles or different ways of building that structure. The engineering, how high can I build it before it falls down? The art, you want to make it look pretty, or Art Nouveau techniques to it. And math is always incorporated when you're building something. Do you have enough materials, and how do you measure those materials? The art elements appeal to the emotional part of learning. So it's always kind of I incorporate it as a have to have in my lessons now, because it does strike with the emotional chord. We incorporate read alouds somewhere in the middle of the day or at the end of the lesson, because it promotes literacy about whatever they're studying, whether it's the environment, if it's the ocean, if it's chemistry or science. It starts promoting the vocabulary. And sometimes the stories are fiction and sometimes the stories are nonfiction. So we want to also promote creativity, so that there's a thought process, there's some inquisitiveness that is brought on to the lesson. And sometimes the kids will ask you questions, and sometimes you may ask them questions. So inquiry-based learning is also something that we practice here. And don't feel like you have to know all the answers. I certainly don't. I'm always learning. With technology these days, everybody Googles things. So, it's okay to say, I don't know, let's go find out, and then the kids have an invested interest in that particular subject. And best of all, I always feel you've got to make it fun. When you make it fun, they're engaged, they're involved, they take ownership. So you're the one who is planting the seeds for their learning. All right. So we're going to get started. We are going to have activities for leaves. We're going to have activities for bugs, and we're going to have activities for rocks. So we're going to start with a tree. So this is a share a moment activity with the kids. You pick a tree, any tree. It doesn't really matter which one. You look at a tree, you go, why did we pick this one? And maybe it was a favorite. It has strikes a memory somewhere. It's the first tree you came to. It's a tree that has pretty colors. There's a lot of reasons for picking a tree, but you take a moment and just observe the tree. Note the size of it. How big is it? If you have a little one, it might be kind of fun to just sit the little one by the tree and take a picture. And 3 months later, when they're getting bigger, you take another picture and you have this time progression, which kind of makes it kind of fun. And as the seasons go, the tree may change shape or color. And you can then lay that out and then show them progression of time. Does the tree have seeds hanging from it? And what do those seed shapes look like? Not all seeds are alike, and that's something that you present. You introduce biodiversity. So that's another term that we have. So seeds come in different sizes, different shapes, different colors. So it might be fun to introduce seed shapes. Leaf patterns, the way the leaf grows on a tree, the way the leaf itself on a single leaf might have a different pattern, might have a different shape. And so it might be kind of fun to pick some leaves off a particular tree or seeds from that same tree and a picture. And now you have a set of cards. And what I would do is, if you have time, you can pick from 3 different trees, maybe a jacaranda. They have flat seeds. Their leaves are kind of more like a parallel in a line shape. Or you can pick like the leaves on the Costco parking lot, the little maple leaves. Those are really fun because you throw them up in the air and you have little helicopters. Pick a couple of those. And then now you have a set of cards that you can create a matching game. And you have the picture of the tree, the seed, and the leaves. You can just create a matching game or a memory game with the kids. Sometimes if you don't want to pick the tree, but you actually can go and see an orchard. You'll like here in my garden, I have an orange tree, and I notice, oh, there's a flower in there, and I wonder what happens to the flower. You might pose the question to the kids and say, oh, what happens with this flower? And then the next time you go out, you might see this little green bud where the flower used to be. And that green bud starts to grow into a big green, round, spherical object. And then over time, that green orb now becomes an orange. So it's kind of fun. You can liken this to their own growth, when you chart their growth on the wall, and say, well, the little flower grows into an orange and your child is growing taller and taller. Now, fun with leaves. There are so many things that you can do with leaves. You can gather leaves. You can gather as many as you can. And we'll talk about ones that are safer to pick over ones that are not. You can make leaf prints. We have a skill set for older ones and skills for younger ones. You don't need a lot of stuff. So you need maybe some paints, crayons, colored pencils, paper, things that you already have around the house. You can make leaf puppets. I have this book here by Lois Allard called Leaf Man, and it's really fun because they take leaves and they make little puppets, tell little stories about them, and they take advantage of the colors, the shapes to make all of these fun characters in a story. So you can draw from the stories to make little fun stories with the leaves. You can make leaf boats. You can take the leaf by itself and just float it on a puddle of water and see where it goes. So what a lot of kids do at the museum, they'll take a leaf, take it over to the bridge, drop it into the creek, and watch it go under the bridge. And they have races, and so it's very simple play, but kids get engaged and they get all excited about leaves in that case. Now, from a scientific standpoint, you can take leaves and you can feel the texture of a leaf. Does one side feel furry and the other side waxy or smooth? Does it have some kind of texture? What's the shape, right? You can have a heart shape, you can have pointy ones, you can have skinny ones, you can have also different colored ones, right? You can have like this orange leaf is green still, but this sycamore leaf is now brown. And so you can introduce colors to the kids if they're at that level. Now, some leaves, as a naturalist, we like to pick leaves that have already fallen off the tree. Or you can pick leaves from places where the gardener has taken the pile and dumped it into the compost pile. We don't like to pick leaves off the trees because we feel that it tends to hurt the trees in the long run. And if you get into a habit of just picking it off the trees and everyone starts doing that, then the trees get overpicked. And so it's not so nice for the tree anymore. Um, if you look at an orange tree, you ever wonder why it's always green? Or you might notice the pattern that it's always green. So we have a scientific term for that, and that's the evergreen because it's always green. And you also notice that orange trees last a long, long time, and they're noted as perennial, meaning that they live longer than 2 years. Okay? On the right-hand side, we have sycamore leaves, and those leaves, if you notice over the year, changes colors. It goes from green to red to orange to yellow and eventually to brown when it loses all the pigmentation. Those are deciduous trees, right? Because they change color over the seasons. Now, in the picture, you might notice I have a coin or a pen. Sometimes it's hard to understand what size these leaves are if you don't have a measuring device. Sometimes you don't have a ruler within your hand, but you might have a pen or you might have a coin. And so I put a quarter in my picture to give you a sense of this leaf is bigger than a quarter. It might be a little bit bigger than a pen, but it gives you an idea of how big the leaves are. And that's what scientists do. Sometimes you don't have a measuring device on you, so you grab the next best thing, which is a coin or a pen. Sometimes they even put their own hand in the picture because you always have your hand with you. So you can stick that in the picture. You can see I have two balls by the sycamore leaf. Those are the seedlings that come off that same tree. So they look a little bit coronavirusy, but yeah, those are sycamore seeds. Some leaves that are not so safe to pick, there are many reasons. A couple of them that I will talk about now is one, there are some that are protected by the Endangered Species Act. One of these is called white sage. We do have samples of this at the museum. White sage is important to the Chumash tribe. They use it for their cultural celebrations, and it has been a victim of poachers. People have been plucking them along the hiking trails and selling them for money. And so that means that the Chumash do not have enough to do what it is they do for the cultural celebrations. On the right, I have a picture of poison oak. Now, poison oak is a winter deciduous, meaning that it changes color in winter. So if you see the bright red leaves, that's very indicative of poison oak. But in the spring and summer, it's hard to tell because they're green and they look beautiful. I mean, they're gorgeous leaves. In the picture, they look like they have a waxy coating. And if you notice, they are in clusters of 3 per node. So every node has 3 leaves. So hikers have a little saying, leaves of 3, let them be. So if you see leaves that are clustered in 3, let them be. Sometimes you can see it in poison ivy. Sometimes you can see it in poison sumac. Okay. So if you see the clusters of 3, let them be. Okay? The oils from the poison oak is really what gets you into trouble. When you get the oils on your hands or on your legs, um, temptation is to wash it off. And it is the thing to do is use soap and warm water to wash it off, because you want to kind of get the oils to, in my head, essentially to melt a little bit so that you can wash it off. But I would not recommend using personal cloth towels, because what happens is the oils get into the cloth towels, and then you would say dump it in the washer to wash your clothes, and then the oils get spread all over to the other clothes in your load. So I would try to use like paper towels so that you can just wipe yourself off and throw it away. You just don't want it spreading all over the place. So if you do get it on you, make sure try to use as much paper towels as I can. There is a soap called Technu, if you get it, that is designed for the poison oak. So I think hikers use that a lot. We have that at our camps for the campers who get affected. In a moment, at the end of the presentation, I will talk about leaf rubbings, but all you need for leaf rubbings are paper, crayons, and colored pencils, and the leaf itself. Next thing, I'm going to move on to the Beetle Box Exploration. So here at camps, we always have our bugs that are easy to handle in little boxes for the kids to explore. So I'll show you what mine looks like in a minute. And we collect bugs off dead leaves, under rocks, under trees in a web. Sometimes they can float on the pond or puddles. The striders are notorious for that. Very rarely do we catch anything in the air. It's just too tricky because our nets are not sophisticated enough. And then you can collect them in jars or in the nets. Some people make an easy net by using old pantyhose and a pipe cleaner or a hanger to catch them. And if you're a true scientist, you note that in your notebook where you found it, what kind of temperature was that day, and you have crayons to kind of just note what the bug looked like in your notebook. Now, sometimes for fun, we like to collect the bugs for a bug race that we put on the tabletop, and I'll show you how we do it at the museum, and then I'll show you a household version of that. We handle the bugs in our hands. Sometimes as teachers, we will hold them for the students so the students can pet them. And then when they get acclimated, the kids will want to hold them themselves. Sometimes kids won't want to hold them. We do offer kids to hold a moth and let it free. We do that sometimes with the monarchs. If we can collect enough monarchs, we will let you handle them and then let them go free. And so sometimes that emotional release is very soothing for some kids, but it's very nerve-wracking for other kids. So you kind of have to gauge which way your kid is comfortable with. Once you hold, for this particular beetle box demonstration that I would do, we will have different stages of life for the beetle, which I will hopefully be able to pull out of the box when I do the demonstration. But you can talk about life cycles. You can talk about, where in the stage of life they are, and give them the scientific name for each stage. If you are willing to hold the insect close enough, you can look at the body parts. A true insect has 3 body parts: the head, thorax, and abdomen. You can draw these shapes. Sometimes the head shape is not the same for all bugs, and maybe you can concentrate on the head one week, and next week you concentrate on the thorax, and the next time you concentrate on the abdomen, and so on. So you can make it a lesson as long as you want, or as simple as you want. Some read aloud books that I like for this group are The Hungry Caterpillar. and the ladybug girl. In camp, we do have a song that we sing um, to kind of reinforce the three parts of an insect. So here, if you look at my insect on the right, you can see the head, you can see the thorax, and you can see the abdomen. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this song to you. The words are on the screen if you want to follow along. But the head, you point to the head. The thorax is your chest, and the abdomen is your tummy. And the theme goes to the tune of head, shoulders, knees, and toes. So here we go. I'm sorry for the bad singing, but I will try my best. So it goes head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, eyes and mouth, antennas too. 6 legs, 4 wings. That's an insect just for you. Sorry about that. But if you have musical inclination, go for it. Here is an example of the beetle life cycle. The demonstration I have is on a beetle, and it looks like this. You can see the head, thorax, and the abdomen. It has 6 legs and 2 antennae, right? And here I took an infographic from Enchanted Learning, and it shows you the life cycle of mealworm, which becomes the darkling beetle. So you have the egg, which is hard to find actually in our box, so I won't demonstrate the egg. But then there's the larvae, which is the mealworm. Now you can get these at a bait shop. So for camps, what we do is we do get the mealworms at the bait shop, and then we give you a little clear container because it's very fun to see the whole life cycle as it moves along. And we give you a bunch of oat bran to feed the worm. Okay. After the larvae stage, it goes to a pupa stage. And this is, for me, is not really the same size. They have a different size than the larvae, a different color than the larvae, but it doesn't move very much. So I call this my alien stage. It looks like a space alien, but it's the pupa. And then eventually it will evolve into an adult. And if I'm lucky enough, I think I saw a teenager. So we may be able to pull a teenager before it gets to the adult stage. For the butterfly, it's very, very similar. You have an egg. The larvae is the caterpillar, the green, orange, and black and white caterpillar that people see. So that the caterpillar is at this stage. The chrysalid, which is the green capsule that hangs with a little gold band on it, is the pupa stage. And then it will evolve or metamorphosize into the butterfly. So the butterfly has a very similar 4-stage life cycle, and you can introduce that when you come and see us at the butterfly pavilion. All right. There, this is the fun part because a lot of kids squeal. So you don't have to do bugs for bug races. You can use snails. And it's really fun to see a snail race because the fun part about them is that they move faster than you think. And but they also leave a thing of slime. So that's where the grossness will come out. And sometimes kids will squeal over that. When you are picking bugs for a bug race, I usually avoid the ones with wings because I'm not fast enough to catch them and they will go all over the place. So one thing to avoid probably are anything with wings because you can't catch them. With the races, you can have the kids design the track. And then once they design the track, you can put the piece of paper into a plastic gallon-sized bag and to protect it. And then like snails, when they release their slime or poop, you can just take the track out of the bag and throw the bag into the trash. Okay. Okay, so now we are on to rocks. Rocks you can get from the beach or in the garden. Some people have them as part of their landscaping. One or two rocks are fine, but not a lot of rocks. Or you might just buy them at the home improvement store. Right? We like to do art with some of our rock paintings. We introduce Chumash art through rock paintings. Um, we like to do rock sculptures. We find it to be very meditative to do rock sculptures. They require some patience. We also introduce kids to rock sorting. This is where they kind of use their analytical skills to decide, oh, do I want to sort it by colors? Do I want to sort it by sizes or shapes? Um, it's up to them. We leave it totally up to the kids to decide. And so we kind of learn how the kids learn based on the way they sort rocks. If you want to go into a more scientific um, side of rock experiments, we do a sorting thing because we want to name the rocks. So we will talk about more of the color and the texture and the crystals that the rocks may have. We will test a rock, and we test it by, does it sink or float? Now, sometimes it blows their mind that a rock can float. Pumice is very porous, so it has a lot of air holes, and so it actually floats. We have a rock that dissolves in water, and it turns out it's actually a salt rock, and they will dissolve in water. So sometimes it surprises them that the rocks do things that they're not normally accustomed to. We do what we call penny scratch tests. So you can use your fingernail to scratch a rock, or you can use a penny to scratch a rock, but it's a test of hardness because minerals and rocks have different degrees of hardness, and sometimes scientists sort their rocks based on how hard the rock is. We go back to the sculptures where you can talk about the center of gravity of a rock. The center of gravity is where the balance point is. So now you're introducing physics into the science lesson, even when they don't realize that it's physics. So sometimes having fun can also be a learning experience. Let's go visit some tide pools. Now, tide pools, they're expansive, and we want to make sure that you are safe around the tide pools. And so you need to be aware of your surroundings, especially in the seasons where we have sneaker waves. Now, sneaker waves is one of those waves, the big, humongous waves that just literally surprises you and knocks you off and tumbles you around, and you'll be very annoyed that you've gotten wet. So it's always important to face the water so that you are aware when that comes to you. Watch for the surf. Sometimes this is what surfers do. They count how many times the waves come in, and they recognize a pattern. So maybe pattern recognition again is another thing that you can introduce while you're watching the surf. Prepare your kids to know that they're going to get wet, sandy, and cold at the tide pools, especially when they see an animal. They're going to go right into the water and not realizing how deep that particular tide pool may be. So it is more than likely they'll get wet and sandy when they're visiting the tide pool. I like to tell our kids to be a gentle giant when they're at the tide pools because they're huge, and the little animals in the tide pools are a lot smaller. So you need to be a gentle giant. And what that means is be mindful that the creatures are in the water for a reason. They breathe in the water. So that's how they get their oxygen. So you want to make sure, excuse me, you want to make sure that they are in water when you take it out. And make sure you put it back in. You don't want to take it home because they won't survive the trip. Okay. So here I'm going to show you a video of a crab in the tide pool. Did you see it? It's right here in the center. Little tiny. So this is how small they are. Very, very small. Here is an anemone. You might ask the child, oh, what's happening? They'll say, it's squidgy. They might say, it's soft. If you allow them to touch them, they can touch with a 1 finger or 2 finger touch. And they might say, oh, it's sticky, okay? So the anemone is actually gathering food. And so if you touch them or activate um, their fingers, they're going to think you're food. And so that's why they're trying to trap their food in when they close up. Okay, so sometimes when you see them really closed up, like this one up here, they're trying to conserve their water because they're not underwater. This one that we touched was still underwater. This one doesn't have any water. So it's trying to conserve its water. So it's going to stay closed until the surf comes in and um, covers them with water again. All right. So I hope I have shared some activities and ideas for you to explore with your kids. Um, as I said, we're always learning. There's always something new. We will always discover new species. In this picture, I have a 10-line June beetle, which is one of my favorite beetles because it's just so pretty, and they live in pine needles, which is why they're in pine needles here. That's their habitat. But they are just gorgeous animals. So I'll encourage you to have fun and enjoy what nature has to offer. And now I'm going to switch over and try to demo some of the activities that I have described. Okay, all right. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this video because it's not happening. Okay, so that way I can make this bigger. So I'm going to start with the leaf first. So here I have a sycamore leaf. And so if you feel the leaf, you can feel that there is some texture on one side and not so much on the other side. So you want to make sure that the texture side is under the paper. Okay, so you have a piece of paper and the leaf is behind it. Oops. Okay. Right. So you're going to take a crayon. Now, I like to take the paper off the crayon, and it's because it gives me more surface area. So to take the paper off the crayon, soak it in some water, and eventually the paper will soften, and then you can just rub it off, and then you have a naked crayon. Okay. So you have your leaf, you have your paper, you have your crayon, and you're going to press really hard along the paper so that you can create the image of the leaf. And when you do that, you will have something that's just do this. That will look like this. Uh, you see it? You see it? Okay. So you can do that with foil as well. If you take a piece of foil and again, texture side up, and then put the foil on top and just run a pen over the leaf. You also will get the leaf texture onto the foil. So it's kind of like metal embossing if you're into that kind of art. Okay. So, and then you can kind of focus the kids onto that feature of the leaf. And you'll see you can mix colors and you'll have this wonderful art piece of a different leaf. And you have a particular reference. So now let me introduce you to our bug box. Okay, so here we have some beetles. I don't know if I can bring them close enough to the screen for you, but I will try. Okay, so can you see the beetle on my hand? Okay, so some kids are nervous about him, and that's okay. You as the grown-up must not show fear. So go ahead, and this one is really active. Now these beetles are nocturnal, so they're really active right now. And normally I can't even get them to wake up when I'm in the camps with the kids. So here we go. All right. And if you get up close enough to them, you can show them the head, thorax, and abdomen. Here is, I'm going to try and get my space alien. So this is, my space alien. Okay, and we'll try to put him at the camera. See if you can see it. Don't know if you can see him. Can you see him? Yeah, right. So he's kind of my space alien right there. Yeah. And then we have the mealworm. Okay. And these are the worms that you can get at the bait store. All right. So when you're going fishing, you can get them from the bait store. Okay. All right. So now you have a whole life cycle. And that's why I like these beetles that you can actually demonstrate the whole life cycle. Right. Now, the next thing we have is the rocks. So we have all kinds of rocks that we give to the kids. We can talk about texture. We can talk about crystals. We can talk about color, anything that you want to, right? If you want to take a penny, you just scratch them, right? Or you can use your fingernail and scratch them. And if it scratches the rock, then you can start introducing the concept of erosion. Okay, you start talking about the rock cycle. So you can talk about rock cycles. You can talk about how the crystals are formed in rocks as well, right? And then the other part is if you want to do the float and sink, all you do is you can have a jar of water and you ask them to make the prediction, right? Do you think it'll float? Do you think it'll sink? And then drop it into the jar of water, or a plastic bowl of water would be safer, but I chose glass for the demonstration. And, it has them thinking, it has them, kind of an analytical skill development, right? Now, you can take that leaf too, tear a piece of a leaf and drop it into the water and ask them, do you think it'll sink or float? Right? So there's a lot of things that you can introduce while you're trying to introduce the sinking of the rock. Now, my favorite part is to take the rock and paint it, right? So then the kids can introduce art. When you paint, I just use the normal acrylic paints that you can get at the art store. All right, nothing fancy, nothing expensive, and it takes some time for the paint to dry. So sometimes there's a little sense of impatience with it, but tell them it's going to be beautiful. You might have them paint one whole color because sometimes painting the design is tricky. So paint one color and then add the design. So I painted this completely red, and then I put in the black head, and then the elytra for the ladybugs, and then the dots afterwards. And then once all the paint is dry, you can put the googly eyes on the top on it. And then you can put the googly eyes on it, and then they'll have the eyes for the bug. Okay. All right. So that is what we kind of do at camps, and I hope you enjoyed the activities that we had. This is the start of some of the camps that we do to introduce science and art and nature. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you to you. If somebody has a question, he's welcome to write it in the question in the chat, so we can highlight a few minutes for any question. You teach the children to recognize the plants too, right?
Yes, we do. So sometimes, yeah, especially the poison oak, we actually bring them to the poison oak. We don't bring the poison oak to them because, so we bring them to the poison oak and we kind of point to it and show it to them. A lot of kids in our camps have gone on many hikes with their families, and so they actually know what it looks like.
Yes, it's a question here. What are some common kinds of rocks and bugs in our area?
Because of where we live, a lot of rocks are what we call sandstone. So the sand has been squeezed really, really hard over a long, long period of time to create things that are called sandstone. A lot of rocks also have fossils in them. So like in the museum, we have these big boulders of sandstone that have fossil shells in them. And it's kind of fun to go and look for those particular rocks. And the bugs, there are so many bugs. I don't even know. We have a beetle expert on campus. That's all he does. There's, a few million species of beetles. We have, and not all of them have been discovered or completely studied. We have a lady who is a butterfly specialist. That's her, butterflies and moths. That's her thing, and she likes to study them. We have trips at the museum called Conversations with the Curator. So you can talk with the specialists if you're interested in any particular science. So we have a geologist, a paleontologist, the beetle guy, someone on clams if you're really interested in clams. So, but for us in camps, we have the hissing cockroach in the classroom. So they're not really an insect because they don't have all three body parts. So that's kind of one of the lessons we have, the beetle versus the hissing cockroach. We kind of demonstrate that. The cockroach is a little intimidating because it's much, much bigger. It's almost about the half of the size of my hand. So the kids get a little excited about them and they hiss when you make them mad, they will hiss. So they make themselves sound like a snake. But, there are a lot of beetles. Roly-polies, though they're not an insect, are fun to collect, and we do roly-poly races at that point, but it's whatever kids find. Sometimes we find a lot of aphids in our milkweed, so we kind of collect only the common ones for kids to play with, even though they may not be common in this particular area.
Yes, we had even like a ladybug, like one time of the year, that bugs are all around.
Yes, yeah. Everything comes in season. So if you are like, we just had the migration of monarchs happen over Thanksgiving. So sometimes this season, especially, we notice monarchs everywhere. So some of them are the migrating ones, and some of them are natives. So the migrating ones have already moved out, and the native ones are here doing their thing. And hopefully, with enough nectaring plants and milkweed in town, we can have our big population again.
You used to highlight a room with butterflies, like for people to visit. Do you still have that place? Is it
Yes.
working?
So it's changed now. So there used to be a big wall of insects that you can take a magnifier around. So that's been removed, but there is now a panel of insects where it goes through evolutionary changes. So you can study the evolution of how bugs are sorted and what we call speciated. So sorting is a way scientists speciate different bugs. So there's a way that it's arranged so that you can see the evolutionary changes of the insect world. So it's pretty fun. And we have a lot of more environmental, ecological messages now. So we're into climate change as well. And we talk about the wildfires that have happened and why it's good and why it's bad for the environment.
One thing that is very interesting when you say the sage, the white sage, and teach them like disrespecting somebody's culture. I think that is a very good message too.
Yes, yeah. So it's been noted that that particular plant has been poached. So it's over collected, and some people are over collecting it for commercial gain, and that kind of creates a sustainability issue for our environment here, for our culture.
Yes, it's true. Well, it's no more question, and thank you so much. We learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I am sure everybody learned a lot here tonight.
Yes, I hope so.
Yes, I can't wait to go and see all the
Oh yes,
birds.
come on to the museum. Yeah, the butterflies will be back in the spring. So after Memorial Day, they will be here.
Okay, sounds great. Holly, do you want to add something else? No?
I put it in the chat when I got kicked out earlier, but but thank you so much for joining us, Ty. It was such an interesting presentation. I know that our families and caregivers will get a lot out of it. And we will see you back next week for our Spanish presentation about the same topic. So, yay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.